This episode of the Music Production Podcast is brought to you by La La Lay. La La Lay allows you to extract vocals, drums, guitars, and other instruments from any song. It's all done online using an AI-powered technology, and you will have your stems in minutes. I tested La La Lay on a song called Being With You by my band Some Good Evil that I recorded, and I'm really impressed with the results. Here's the original. Now let's hear just the drums. Now the music without the drums. And now just the vocals. That's up to you. Ain't no kind of magic gonna do the work for you. No drums. Can't fight the feeling. And just the vocals. Can't fight the feeling. And the original. I'm pretty amazed with the results. It's like baking a cake and then taking the eggs and the milk out of the cake after it's already been made. I'm kind of amazed that it's even possible. The first 10 minutes of audio you process at La La Lay is free. That's how I made these examples. After that, you can select the package that's right for you. Try La La Lay today at LALAL.ai. That's LALAL.ai. Or just click on the link in the show notes to this episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Music Production Podcast. I am your host, Brian Funk. And on today's show, I have a life coach, songwriter, filmmaker, and author of Not Effing Around, the No BS Guide for Getting Your Creative Dreams Off the Ground, Jeff Leisowitz. Welcome to the show, Jeff.
Hello. How's it going? Thanks for having me on here.
You're very welcome. It's nice to have you. It's great to get a look at your book and some of the things you're offering people. I think you have this, and maybe people will get it just from the title, this kind of no-nonsense, straight to the point, kind of kicking the ass.
Well, there's some
approach.
Nonsense in there, but yes, it's a focused.
Well, you have some nice illustrations in there, so those,
yes,
if we want to call that nonsense, but for people that like pictures in their books. But what I mean by that really is, it's, you're not really, lying to people. Like sometimes, the creativity artists, we're all very sensitive, right? And we're putting ourselves out there, and sometimes we're real gentle with each other. Like, oh, you're doing great. Don't worry, it'll come to you when you're ready. But you're kind of taking that out and exposing the harsh reality of what we're actually doing here. So I like that approach a lot, because I think we get enough like coddling, and we're good enough at coming up with our own excuses on our own. We don't need help from a book as well.
That's right. And let me say, so that is definitely part of it. And I also believe that there's definitely a time for nurturing and a time for kicking ass. Mm-hmm. Right. And I've seen this as a music producer where I've got, whatever, singers or somebody over here doing something. Some people react really well to being nurtured. Oh, come on, honey, you can do it. Try it again, all that kind of stuff. And then some people are like, come on, let's do this. I know you can do better. Do it again. And they get it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's like coaching too, in like a sport. Some people really respond well to that. You see it especially like when you watch, like say like a boxing match, and you see in the corner how the different people treat them. Some people need to be told, "Hey, you're doing fine. You're gonna come back." And other people, "You're getting your ass kicked out there, man. What are you doing?"
Rocky's in the corner,
yeah,
killed over there.
But it is, I guess that's something as a producer you really have to pay attention to and notice about the artist you're working on, like what they're responding to, right?
Absolutely. I mean, definitely part of the job of a producer is to understand who you're dealing with. I mean, your job is really to get the best out of, the musicians, the clients, whatever. And, there's all kinds of technical skills and musical skills and stuff, but the communication is interpersonal. It's like being a good communicator, understanding, reading the vibe of the room, seeing when the guitar player's starting to get pissed off, like all that kind of stuff.
Mm.
So yeah.
Yes, need some emotional intelligence for all that, right?
Emotional intelligence, exactly.
So I was wondering if you wouldn't mind giving us like a little background on how you came to
Oh
all
yeah.
this. You clearly have some experience in this world, so it gives you the authority to write about it.
I've got some authority. So my creative journey began as a little kid, where I was kind of one of these weird, friendless kids, right? Imaginary worlds and this and that. When I was about 7 or 8 years old, 9 years old, I went to sleepaway camp in the Pocono Mountains of Pennsylvania.
Hmm.
Okay. And this was in the late 70s. This will, date me. And every night after dinner, they had what they called free play, which was an hour for these kids to just kind of run amok. Okay, do whatever you want. So this one summer, maybe 78, 79, something like that, there was an empty cabin. So one of the counselors, like one of these 20-year-old guys, brought up his drum kit, a big old 70s stereo, and a couple of milk crates filled with classic rock records, which wasn't classic yet because it was happening then. So, this is Zeppelin and Billy Joel and Tom Petty and, like all that kind of stuff. So, anyway, this guy would go into this cabin and drum to these records. And I, as a little kid, would kind of sit under this tree 20 or 30 feet away and listen. And, the sun would set and the fireflies would come out. And I was just like mesmerized, like, what the hell's going on in there? And then one day, this guy comes out and he's like, hey, kid, come here. I'm like, He's like, you want to come in and check this out? I'm like, yeah. I go into this cabin and he puts on the Who song, Won't Get Fooled Again, which is, as you know, a major rocker. And this guy just pounds the shit out of the drums. And my little heart explodes in beauty, joy, and wonder. And I'm like, music is a thing. Wasn't too long, years later, the parents were like, what do you want to do with your life? Well, be a rock star, what else would I want to do? Was not the answer they were hoping for. So anyway, fast forward the rest real quickly. Um, I've played in a bunch of bands. I've recorded many hundreds of songs, won an award, Best Independent Electronic Artist in the World in 2000, although it sounds a little dubious to me. I worked for a radio station in Seattle that broke grunge music to the world. I was a writer there. I teach songwriting at a college, put records out, lots of spins on the streamers. So that's, a lot of the music stuff. But I'm also a writer, wrote this book, screenplays, blah, 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 all this kind of stuff. And then I've always been into human potential, right? Because there's a huge difference between who we are and who we could be. Right? What is the maximum awesomeness of our lives? So I've really spent my whole life trying to understand mostly our psychology, like what stops us. And then along the way, with all this experience, learning, the music business. When I was in college, I got an internship at Mercury Records, like in this major record company. I was like, holy shit, look at this, how cool and fucked up this is, right? Et cetera, et cetera. So I practiced something for a while called NLP, Neuro Linguistic Repatterning, which is kind of like a psychological method to help people untangle their subconscious blocks so they can make better choices and things like that. And I can tell you more about that later. But that kind of morphed into the coaching. So now I coach creatives, musicians, and all kinds of creatives, really all over the world. I mean, it's kind of awesome. And then, like you said, I wrote the book. And the book, for me, just kind of came out of, too much coffee one day at the coffee shop, or at least that's where it started. And the book is essentially designed for me to like I've banged my head against the wall literally for decades in my creative pursuits. And I've had many successes, and I've had many, many, many more failures. And this book is my attempt to help you, dear reader, to bang your head against the wall a little bit less. You know what I'm saying? So,
Right. Save us some trouble from your experiences.
exactly. A little less bloodshed would be good.
Right.
Yeah.
So you've got quite a lot of experience in a lot of different creative areas and got to see, I guess, the insides too, talking about like an internship at Mercury Records. That must have been
Yeah.
pretty eye opening. What is it about creativity then that you find so interesting? Like what that you've learned from it along this journey of yours?
Wow. Well, I mean, like I said, I have been up and down and up and down in this journey, yearly, monthly, weekly, and then even daily in ways. And I have found that at its best, creativity is a way for us to be seen, expressed, healed, and connected. So, what am I talking about? Well, to be seen. In this world, I believe we are really not particularly well seen and understood. So if you're driving down the freeway or walking down the street, you're not seen at all, except people trying to avoid running into you. Your next level in is like,
Maybe.
your acquaintance. What's that?
He said maybe. It's funny.
Yeah, maybe, right?
Maybe they'll avoid
Maybe they'll avoid you.
running you
So
over.
then you got like people at work or at the coffee shop or at the bar or something. They're acquaintances and they kind of know you. Hey, Brian does music, but whatever. They don't get that into it. They don't really get you. And then you got your close people, and this is your family, your friends, your lovers, your like your real people. And hopefully they see you and get you. But in my experience, they don't fully see you and get you. So that's the definition of seen. What does expressed mean? Expressed simply means doing the thing, going from the potential to the actual, right? So think of a dancer on Saturday night, and she's sitting in the corner, and the disco ball's spinning around, the beat's thumping, but in that moment, she's not expressed as a dancer. When she gets out on that dance floor and starts shaking it, right? She is now expressed as a dancer. Same thing with musicians. You can have all the gear in the world, but if you're sitting there twiddling your thumbs, right, you're not expressed. Okay, so what's the next part? Being healed through creativity. Well, I believe that when anyone creates with depth and authenticity and vulnerability, there is some kind of healing that occurs, right? It just feels good. It feels better than you were before. And this is oftentimes a catharsis, right? Where, you let go of something dark, right? This loneliness or this pain or this trauma or whatever. Right? But it doesn't have to be a catharsis. It can also be a celebration, right? What's the celebration in a love song? I would say it's letting go of all of the loneliness that came before. Okay. So when we are seen, expressed, and healed through authentic creativity, we then give the gift of our creativity to the world. And when I say the world, I'm not talking about Madison Square Garden. This can be one other person. Okay. When you give your gift of creativity to the world, you become the gift because you show others that they can be seen, expressed, and healed through their creativity. And this changes our role as songwriters, producers, creators, whatever, from just simply like, oh, I'm making music or doing the thing, to being like sort of this undercover top secret ninja rock star army, right? Of people who are here to help connect and heal the world. Okay, dig this. Because, what makes, when you listen to your favorite songs, right, there's a reason why you connect with those lyrics and that vibe. And the reason is the artist created something that you resonate with. You understand them or they understand you, kind of in a way, right? So the more authentic, creative art that we get out there, the more the entire world is going to under, understand each other, right? And that is one of the biggest problems we face on the entire planet.
Hmm. Yeah, understanding each other for sure. You know,
Right?
that's an interesting way to think about it because a lot of my favorite music is the type of music that makes me want to make music and gets me
Mm,
excited and say, "Oh, I could do something like that," or "That's a fun way to approach something." And it's very validating too when it somebody else connects with something that you feel because it's very easy for us to go through life feeling lonely and different and this never happens to anyone else. It's no one would ever get what I'm going through. And then when you come across those things, it's a very powerful feeling that you
it,
get.
it it is. It's very powerful. And speaking lyrically, the way I always like to think about it is when you write a lyric, you want the lyric to be both specific enough to your experience, but also general enough that the listener can put themselves into it,
Mm.
right? So if I say, just as an example, um, I had this experience where, this one day I was with my girlfriend, back in college, and it was a Tuesday afternoon around 4 o'clock, and we were at this bridge over this little pond, and we were eating strawberry ice cream, and she broke up with me. Like, that's not exactly relatable, specifically relatable. But if I go into a room of 1,000 people and say, hey, who here has been broken up with?
Mm.
Every freaking hand in that room is going to go on there. So part of our job as lyricists is finding that intersection between what is specific and true and what is general and true. It's a good trick.
Mm. Yeah, I'm always fascinated with lyrics that get very specific, yet in a way, it's almost easier to connect with that on some level. I might not be. I was just talking about an example of a Pixar, like a little Pixar short I saw about I think it's called Piper. These little birds trying to like get food from the ocean as the waves crash and recede, and he's too
Mm-hmm.
scared, and he finally goes for it and gets, but it's about fear. I'm not a bird. I'm not trying to get and scavenge food out of the ocean as
Right.
the tide drifts away, but I get the feeling of it. And even though I might not have been on, the bridge looking over, lake, whatever, eating strawberry ice cream, like if you're telling me about that and you're describing the way the ice cream dripped down your hands or something because you were too in shock to eat your ice cream, it's still like, yeah, I didn't have the ice cream, but in my story, it was the radio playing in the background, or it was
Right.
the car ran out of gas or something.
Right. Right.
I love that because it's so strange how you would think if you just gave the general thing, then we'd be like, oh yeah, we all know what that's like, we get it. But it's when you get to those real details that it comes to
Exactly.
life.
Exactly. And the right details. If it's baby, baby, I love you, you're like, oh God, please.
Hmm.
Right. We've heard that 20 billion times. And although everyone hopefully feels that and says it, at some points in their life, we need to say the general things more specifically. So
Hmm.
exactly. I love that.
I like to think of the verses as the general stuff, and then the chorus is the kind of message, the theme.
Yeah.
And I don't listen to
Cool.
a ton of country music, but that is what I really enjoy about country music when it's on and I have to decide to enjoy it. As I think as musicians, like one of the things that's beautiful is you can enjoy like any kind of music, even the stuff you're not going to listen to. But I always love that about country songs and how specific they get there. And usually they're very specific about exactly what they're drinking and exactly what kind of truck they have. But
Right.
those details really do paint the picture for you and set the stage so that you can kind of go in and experience those general things that are going on in these specific situations.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Cool. Yes. And like you said, even if you don't like a genre of music or a specific song in a genre that you like, uh, it's always a great idea to pay attention to what you don't like and why you don't like it,
Mhm.
because that will help you inform, how to do the opposite for yourself.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point. You can also learn what not to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Never do
Don't do
that.
this.
Sometimes I like to challenge people when we're doing songwriting and stuff. You have to do the thing that you hate. Make it work, though,
Mm,
That's a fun
interesting.
twist on it. I find at least it takes away the attachment to the idea a little bit. 'Cause I think a big problem in our creativity is getting too critical early on before the idea has a chance to blossom. So if they're not attached to
Absolutely.
the idea because, well, I would never use that anyway, it kind
Right.
of bypasses that way
That
of
is
thinking.
that is cool. So I've got a workshop, and I do this with clients sometimes. Workshop's called The Art of the Ephemeral.
Mhm.
Okay, so I have them draw things and destroy them right there, right? Like create it and wreck it.
Do you
So it
tell them that beforehand, or do you?
I don't tell them from the first time. So this
That's
came
funny.
from a class in college where I took this pottery class, and the wheel and all that business. So we finally get it going. We got the wheel. We work on it for a week. We come back, and the teacher says, "Okay, you guys, let's talk about these things." We talked about it. He's like, "Come down the hallway to this little room." So this little like cinder block room. Okay, and he gave us goggles to put on. Okay, bring your pots in. He's like, "Okay, smash them." Like, smash them. We just worked on these, but we smashed them, and it was pretty fun. But his point was, we don't have to always get so precious with everything we create, right? It reminds me of the Buddhist monks who create the sand paintings, the sand mandalas. You're familiar with this, right?
Hmm.
These guys get together on a piece of concrete somewhere, or flat floor or whatever. They get colored sand, and they make these really intricate mandalas. Okay, mandala is it's like a visual to meditate to. It's like really, they take weeks to make these things, and then they say a little prayer on it, and they sweep it away.
Hmm.
They destroy it. And the concept in Buddhism is nothing is permanent, right? So have this beauty, create this beauty, and let it go. And although we certainly want to, save and put out our music and stuff like that, it's just a good balance, especially if you're getting too wound up
Hmm.
in all the things that you create.
Well, for me, right, like since I got a computer, I'd say, which is, I think I got my Mac in 2005, the first time I
Nice.
ever had a computer. But even before that, I had tape recorders and different types of recording gear. It became, that's like 20 something years of my life now has become when I play music, I record it. And
Yeah.
especially now with the computer, record it, record it. So everything suddenly takes on this significance. Even like we start these conversations on the podcast on Zoom, and Zoom now has this function when you hit record, it goes recording in progress. And suddenly, like, it's like an instant tension creator. Like, oh, now what we're doing is on the official record and it's going to be preserved forever.
Right.
But music, when you play it, it just happens, and it's by its nature, it's ephemeral. It's just poof. It's like a
Right.
cloud of smoke, even not even as permanent as that, and it's just gone as soon as
And
it
that was
happens.
always true for every music that every human created until what, 1880 or something like that, when they started with the wax cylinder
Hmm.
and the
Yeah.
phonograph, right? I mean, it had to be live. The only way to hear music was if you were in the room. Think
Hmm.
about that.
Yeah. It's incredible. And
Yeah.
we've grown up now where that's actually the rarity. And
Yeah.
to go back to your point about, you were saying one of the gifts of like our creativity, sharing our creativity, is kind of how it influences others. So, and I said, the music I like is the stuff that inspires me. That's one of the things that happens when you do it. You show other people that, hey, you could do it too. I'm not special. And for me, growing up, I was really never around people playing an instrument. Like
Mhm.
maybe I mean, my sister played the flute in band, so that I didn't connect with that too much. That just seemed like another class at school.
Right.
Um, but when a buddy of mine brought over a guitar, and he's like, "Hey, I've been learning guitar," and showed me like Enter Sandman on the guitar, and it was like, "Well, you're doing that? Like, then I could probably do that too." And all of a sudden it like opens up. But that was like a point where in my life I'd never had anybody play songs off the radio on a guitar in front of me before. So I like didn't even understand that was a possibility.
Right. It's seeing and feeling that miracle of cool, like this cool thing on the radio. I could do some version of that.
Hmm. In
Right.
my head,
So,
you had to be like struck by lightning on the mountaintop to become a musician playing rock music. It just wasn't in my realm of possibility. I played
right.
sports. I liked to draw because my friends drew, but it wasn't until I saw that,
Yeah.
and it is so crazy to think that that's how it always was until really recent history, a couple
Yeah.
generations of people.
Yeah. So true.
I think that is a cool idea, though, what you're talking about with that, the sand painting, because if you get too caught up in your music and your ideas, that can you tie yourself to the idea, and then your ego gets bruised if we say, "Hey, that part just doesn't work in the song." Well, what do you mean?
Right.
That's me. That's my part, and that I'm
Right.
sure
So,
that's something you must work with clients and
yeah,
with people, right?
absolutely. So, I mean, kind of what you're talking about there is getting too intellectual with the creative process. And our brains are big and beautiful. And I'm sure all your listeners have amazing brains, and that's cool, right? But creativity really uses just a part of that. But it's really about being playful and curious, right? If you can spin up, to get real amazing creativity, it's that curiosity and the play,
Hmm.
right? And then your brain kind of comes in kind of at the end and fine tunes it a little bit. If you can get that equation going, your ego will step out of it because, you think of a kid playing, the kid doesn't have an ego. It's just playing. It's just play. It doesn't matter. You
Hmm.
just play, right? And that's where the really good stuff comes around.
Well, I know from experience, and especially the last couple of years, started playing in a band again after a couple of years of not playing in a band. That's how I
Mm-hmm.
always played music, but
Mm-hmm.
then producing and all, you get kind of solitary after a while. But playing with people, when you can get in that spot with other people, I guess there's a trust that goes on that has to be developed over time. But when you can just play anything, and it could be the stupidest thing you ever played in your life, and it's okay. Because we've all, like in the group I'm playing with, we've all passed that test with each other. I like how you play the drums. I like how you sing. I like how you do this. We're cool. So now you're free to just not worry about that stuff. And usually it's out of our like silly jams that the ideas come from. We're not bringing things to practice to work on. It's just, hey, that was fun. Let's go with it. And sometimes it's
Yeah.
starts off as a joke or silly, but and ends up that way sometimes too, and that's fine because it's
Yeah.
just it's just play. It's just for the hell of it.
Yeah. And it reminds me of like sort of the kings of that, which would be the Grateful Dead, if you're a Deadhead at all. Right. And my experience of the Dead was always, they had the songs and then they had the jam. And it was really, the song was sort of a small part of it, 20 or 30% of it, really. And what would happen is sometimes it would be a great cacophony and dissonance. And that because they were
Mm.
that free and fluid. And other times, their creativity and curiosity and play would create music in that moment that, in my opinion, was far beyond anything humans could kind of like consciously create.
Mhm.
It was just so beautiful. right? But they would waver. There was, it would go south and it would get better depending on the night or whatever.
Hmm.
But I think that speaks to having the courage to step forward in our creativity and fail and screw it up and make dissonant music and whatever. And who knows? That's where you might find the next nugget of gold, goodness.
Yeah, it's kind of my favorite way to do it at this point. You can get very technical and really intellectualize your way through it, but that to me feels more like work. Or almost, it's weird to say it's like not genuine, but I don't think that's what I mean, but it's calculated in a way that the play, you even use the term free play when you're talking about camp. And I'm just thinking about like how important that was in my life in general growing up, the freedom. And that, I know like kids today, it seems like they're in so many more structured sports and events and play dates with their parents. They're not just going off on their bicycle like we did and just be home by dark.
Exactly.
We got into trouble for that too. It wasn't a perfect way of dealing with it.
It wasn't perfect, but it worked,
But we
worked
also learned how to solve problems on our own. We learned like if there was some dispute or argument, and I can remember bad ways of settling those and then more sensible ways that evolved later on.
Yeah.
It's called play music. We play music.
Yeah, that's right. That is what it's called. Yeah.
But we do definitely let it become a very serious and important thing sometimes, maybe to the detriment of the music itself.
Quite possibly. Yeah.
So when you're working with people, where do you find the blocks and the holdups? What do you see as some of the more common obstacles to people's creativity?
Well, as a life coach for creatives, I kind of work on two different levels. The first level is what I call the outer world. And the outer world is stuff like habits, strategies, understanding your priorities, things like this. It's just like the sort of nuts and bolts of like, what are you doing and how are you doing it? Right. And we all need that. We need the right systems. We need to schedule our things, like all these kinds of things. And then the inner world is the other part. And the inner world is really where so much needs to be cleaned up before we can really excel. So the inner world is the psychology that drives us, the subconscious psychology that drives us. So when we are growing up, we create and embed within our subconscious beliefs about the world and identities about ourselves. And once these are in there, we don't even really notice that they're there. But everything in the world kind of goes through these systems. So if my subconscious belief or identity is, I'm good looking and smart and I can solve any problem and I can do anything I want, that's a good subconscious, like pattern to run. Doesn't mean everything's going to be perfect your whole life, of course, but that's how you process information, essentially. But if your identity about yourself, your subconscious identity is, when things get hard, I quit and it's really not worth it and the world's out to get me anyway, stuff like that, you will sabotage yourself largely before you get anywhere. But even when things do go well, you'll still end up sabotaging yourself, right? And these things, a lot of these kind of energies come into play in terms of the inner critic, fear of failure, getting out of the comfort zone, stuff like that. So I work with people on both of these levels. I use guided meditations. I do all kinds of things with the NLP language patterns and stuff like that. We go in deep and we understand what the root is of what might be stopping you from moving forward in the ways that you want. And then, we heal that, or we change that, we correct that in ways. And then we move into more of the outer world stuff, because we all have these subconscious kind of blocks. You don't get through life unscathed. It's
Mm.
impossible, right? And, some people have gotten further with that stuff than others, and that's fine, and then we kind of move into like, okay, well, what is stopping you? And another thing we always want to look into is the why, the reason why we're doing the thing, whether it's music or anything else. Because when we really know deeply what the why is, it will help us fuel our actions from a different kind of place, from a more heart-centered place. And when we do that, we're fully stepping on the gas, right? If we're doing it for any other reason that we either don't understand or is not aligned with us,
Mm.
it's sort of a waste of time.
Mm. So we all have a sort of programming through our own collection of, I guess, history of victories and traumas, right?
Well put, yes.
And the way you put it reminds me, I think it's a quote attributed to Henry Ford: whether you think you can or can't, you're right. Meaning,
Yes,
like, if you don't think you can do it, then you're going to behave like a person that can't do it. So the first failure, you give up because I can't do it,
right.
compared to
When
the
it gets
person
hard,
that
you give up. It's what most
fails
people
and
do.
says, well, I'm going
Yeah.
to do it. And just that way didn't work. Are there any dangers to having the kind of mental mindset of, I'm good looking, I can accomplish goals, and when setbacks come, I work around them? Can that, like, is there potential for a situation to arise that just shatters your kind of view of yourself?
Well, I think that's two different questions. So the first
Mm.
one is, yes, there is a potential for something, bad to happen, and that is putting all that energy into this ego-based concept of I'm the king and I will,
Mm.
I'm right all the time and all that kind of stuff. That's clearly not a positive. And as a coach, if I were to dig into that in somebody, I can almost guarantee there's going to be something in the subconscious that there's pain around.
Now
Right?
we're covering that up with
That's
this
covering that up.
facade. Yeah.
Right? The second part of your question was like, okay, if you believe that and it is healthier, right? It's not really ego driven. It's just a solid sense of self. Could there be something that smashes that identity? The first thing is, yeah, sure, there probably will be something that smashes that identity, or that, at least bashes it pretty hard.
Mm.
And that is the proof that you are living with that system. And if that system is true for you, you will take a breath, understand what just happened, ask the questions around the failure, right? Which I like to call feedback, right? What can we learn from not getting to our goals, right? And then iterate whatever the thing is, do it better next time. Thus, the identity would not be smashed. It would be maybe damaged for a moment, right? But then you get back on the horse because your identity is solid.
Mm.
And by the way, self esteem, in my view, and confidence is not built upon succeeding in everything we do, because it can't happen, first of all, right? True confidence is built on doing something, failing, learning, and doing it again,
Mm.
right? And eventually, if you do this, you're gonna find successes.
Mm. So the experience of not being able to do it or failing at something and then finding a way to overcome it is where
Right.
a lot of
And
strength is
that's the
built.
feedback.
Mm.
In life coaching, we love the word to reframe,
Mm.
right? To reframe means to look at something in a different perspective, right? If you call it failure, that's That sucks. Who wants failure? Right. But if it's feedback, oh, what can I learn so that I can get better at my thing? It's a completely different deal. And by the way, I've interviewed zillions of high-level creatives, for that radio station I was telling you about. My job was interviewing rock stars in the grunge era. That
Hmm.
was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I would ask them about failure. Hey, what do you guys think about failure? Fucking sucks, But it's the only thing that makes us better. It's the only way to success.
Hmm.
Like, oh, okay. Well, that guy just sold 1 million records. He must know what he's talking about.
Was there anyone that surprised you in particular to tell you like that they go through failure and struggle with this stuff
Anybody that
still?
surprised me in particular? Um, no, but I will tell you a story that kind of rings around that, and that was with the band Everclear.
Hmm.
You know those guys, right?
Yeah.
So Everclear, they lived here in the Northwest. I'm in Seattle, and they were in Portland. And the radio station sent me to visit them at their house in Portland. So we had this interview all day, and this was before they got famous. They were just starting to,
Hmm.
hit it. And they told me that their first single was called Santa Monica.
Hmm.
Swing out past the breakers and watch the world die. You remember that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And they said, we delivered our song to the label and it was 2 minutes long. And they loved it, loved it, loved it. But they said, it's got to be longer. It's got to have another chorus. You got to have a bridge on this thing. And they're like, yeah, you suits, you don't know what you're talking about, that kind of thing.
Right.
And their manager was like, look, they're right. Just do it. We're going to do it this way. They begrudgingly did it. And it was the first single that launched a multi-million-dollar 20-year career.
Hmm.
Right? So sometimes you got,
Yeah.
you got to accept like the world isn't exactly like you want it to be, right?
Hmm.
A 2-minute song isn't going on the radio. It's just not, right? Neither is an 8-minute song,
Hmm.
right? These guys know the business. You might want to listen to them.
Right. Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I know from my own perspective doing this podcast, I haven't met anybody that's told me it's pretty easy for me. I got it all figured out. I just sit down at my guitar and the hits pop right out. And my only real issue is not putting too many hits out at once.
Haven't really ever heard that one, have we?
No, and from people like that you would think, based on what you see, have got it figured out. They must have some sort of system. They must have cracked the code, but nobody ever says it's easy, which I find comforting.
No. And I would, when you think of people who are very successful in the music biz, it's a different dynamic from kind of like the other side, like on the way up. Okay, when you're on the way up, you're doing everything you can to step it up. What's the next step? How do we keep going? Da, 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 all that kind of stuff. When you're a big band, when you're Taylor Swift and you're putting out this next album, right? The world is listening, right? They are going to pay attention for at least 5 minutes in a very big way, which means every note, every word, everything in there is going to be scrutinized. Right? And it's a great opportunity to put your word out and put your work out and be heard. But that's a lot of pressure.
Oh yeah, I can only imagine.
Right? And you fail, she fails in a big way once, not good, twice. She's basically off the chart,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one of the nice things of being unknown, right?
Exactly.
You can only fail so big.
That's right.
Yeah, well, it's an interesting thing to think about because I think we glorify a lot of this stuff and we just see these people in that position and think like, well, they haven't made it, which I think is a kind of cop out on our own when we say, well, it's because she's this or that and she's been up to the top and she knows her grandfathers and whatever, we can make up all these stories. but there's other pressures that come with that for sure.
There's
Different.
tons of other pressures. I mean, your big bands out there have on their payrolls dozens
Mm,
of people. They're running multi-million dollar businesses. It means every month I need to pay out $300,000, something like that.
yeah,
Right? That means you got to generate at least that much.
yeah. And your career is really lots of people's careers.
It's lots of people's careers.
So you better air that bridge, Everclear.
Right? And I'm sure they're glad they did.
Yeah, I think it worked out okay for Everclear. I wanted to ask you to just swing back to NLP.
Yeah,
You
sure.
mentioned you're going to say that, and it came up again. And I think you also talked about like reprogramming or
Repatterning.
recontextualizing,
Yeah,
repatterning.
repatterning.
Okay.
So again, NLP was developed in the 70s by a couple
Neuroling,
of neuro-linguistic repatterning.
repatterning. Okay.
Okay. This was developed by a couple of grad students, originally developed in the 70s by a couple of psychology grad students who wanted to know what were the most effective therapy tools? Like, why were the best therapists so effective? So they asked them, and they all had their answers, but they didn't really know why they were so effective. So these grad students videotaped hours, many hours of these sessions with people. And they combed through these. And what they did was they made like all these data points. What are all these people doing and what do they have in common? Right. So then they could figure out, whoa, these are the things that are really, really powerful. And that is where they kind of came up with this set of tools, both in language patterns and how to talk to somebody, like all these kinds of things that were really effective tools to help us dip into our subconscious quickly and make changes, which could then become permanent changes in our behavior and perception of the world. Right? So again, we all have these identities and beliefs. Some are positive and helpful. And it's another thing we talk about as life coaches. What is helpful? What is useful? If it's not useful and helpful, what are you doing? Right? So using these techniques, we can quickly dive in and start to understand what is stopping us. And then essentially create a new idea or implant a new idea into these subconscious pathways so that we have alternative routes of thinking, right? If you only know one way to go from here to the grocery store, you're always going to go that way, right? Even if it's a crappy pothole filled, terrible way to go. But suddenly, if like, oh, I could go this way, it's a smooth ride down this country road. Damn, why haven't I been doing this for the last 35 years?
Right.
Yeah.
I've heard the brain and the way we think described as like a ski slope. So every time you ski down the path, that's the easy way to go, and that's where but if you try to go down a new path, the snow isn't packed down and you got to work through it, and it's much harder, which is why we often resort to patterns. And sometimes they're not exactly the best patterns. Maybe somehow, some way they got us results. Maybe some of the negative self-talk perhaps saved us from an embarrassment at one point, or would have saved us, so they become the patterns. But it's very easy to naturally just kind of go along the ways that you've already done.
Absolutely. Very well put. And, when you think about it, these patterns are always happening. You're always skiing down that ski slope from the day you were born, right? So if you've got a pattern at 4 years old that says, if I kick and scream and bitch and pound my, things on the ground, my mom's going to give me what I want. Okay, that worked, when you were 4 years old. And maybe that's legit for a 4-year-old, right? But, if you're a 30-year-old and you find yourself doing some version of kicking and screaming and crying and freaking out when you don't get what you want, not helpful, right? All you're going to do is alienate everyone around you sooner or later, right? So that's the kind of pattern that we need to look at and help heal and have alternatives, like make a new ski run, right?
I could see how challenging that must be, because it could be very easy to have your 30-year-old freak out and say, well, the world is out to get me. And that's the problem here. And everyone else is crazy.
It's easy because you've been doing skiing that road for 30 years.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's a lot easier to come up with that explanation than it is to make that new ski path.
It is, and it takes time and it takes awareness, because most people who are driving that one don't even know they're driving it.
Right.
Right? Until you are conscious, there is no way you can change your behavior, because you're going to default to that perception and then that behavior.
How do you manage to get people to recognize that? Like, how do you even know you're on the ski slope? Because, like you said, we're just going all the time. And if, like the programming that we have is so kind of behind the scenes, or sometimes you can see it in another person pretty clearly. Like, well, the world's not out to get you, buddy. You just need to change your attitude. But that never works when you just tell somebody that.
No, it never works. So yes, thank you for saying that. Telling somebody to change their behavior is like ridiculous, right? It doesn't work. First of all, people have to want to change. That's the first thing. And two, as a life coach, people need to discover these patterns. I can often see these patterns literally in minutes, right? Of getting into a real conversation about this stuff. But I will never tell them what I think is going on, right? Until we exhaust every opportunity for them to explore. And it's really the same thing as the creativity. Be curious and play with ideas. And then suddenly this little treasure, it might look like a dark stone, because, this was the shitty thing that happened when I was 10, right? But it's actually that coal turns to gold when we heal it, right? And you can use that energy instead of suppressing that energy. So they need to find it. People need to heal it, love the pieces of ourselves which are hurting us, because they're all, and this is crazy, and I really need to get more into this, whatever, but like take the concept of inner critic. We all have a sense of inner critic, right? And inner critic means the little guy on your shoulder is like, you're not smart enough, you're not talented enough, what the hell are you doing? That thing sucks, whatever. Okay. The inner critic is a piece of our psychology that exists to keep us safe. Okay. It's there for a reason, and it's a good reason. If the inner critic wasn't there, you might be, it's safe to go cartwheeling at the edge of this cliff. Not a smart move, right? Or yell at your boss when, like these things are not smart moves. The inner critic has a reason. But when the inner critic takes over, and it's like, it's not good enough to put this song out on Spotify. It's like, what's the real risk here, first of all, right? The only risk is nobody's going to listen to it, which is what's happening already, You got to put it out there. So instead of putting negative energy into our inner critics, we go the completely unintuitive route, and that is to thank our inner critic for the service it has given us as a whole, and love the inner critic for helping to protect the whole. And then letting the inner critic understand that it is to be of service to the whole and not running the show. Right? And when we do this from a deep place, a calm, hypnotic space, meditative space, this can make tremendous change very quickly. It's shocking, right? Because all these things that within us are there for a reason. The inner critic is there to keep us safe. It's completely legit. It's just, it tends to get over, it tends to overpower our psyches.
Hmm. Yeah, it jumps in when it's not time, or
Yeah.
yeah, and it makes perfect sense. It's really a survival mechanism.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
our first job as humans, survive.
yeah, but I guess it doesn't recognize that putting the song on Spotify is not most likely a life and death situation.
It is not a lethal emergency now.
Right. Hmm. So yeah, I can understand how you sort of need the person to understand that themselves and realize it themselves. Um, and that's something I try to do is I sort of see like that inner critic as like a script or a movie that I'm watching. And every once in a while I put in the inner critic movie that's, I'm terrible, no good, I'm a fake, and all this stuff. And that cripples me for the evening. Unless I can say, let's put on a different movie. It's not time to watch that movie right now.
Right.
We'll stick on something a little more helpful to our situation.
Yeah. I
Hmm.
love that. Thinking of it as movies and almost inserting the movie or the code into,
Yeah.
your conscious experience.
Yeah. That's literally how I picture it because I get it a lot with my job teaching, where I just think like, who am I? Like, I don't have this figured out. I'm still winging it through life here, trying to do what I think is right, but I don't know. Like,
Oh,
who
here's the
knows?
thing. Nobody knows. And let me tell you this story because I found this incredible. So I live here, in Seattle, and Adobe has a big office here.
Hmm.
So they
Like
have,
Photoshop, Adobe.
yeah,
Okay.
Photoshop
Okay.
Adobe, right? So they have public events where their top guys will teach you Photoshop,
Hmm.
right? And all the other products. You just show up and they have a big conference room. They do it in the evenings. Anyway, I went to one of these years ago as I was trying to learn something on Photoshop. This guy says, Photoshop is such an enormous program that although we have experts here that know different parts of this thing inside out and upside down, there is literally no one here who is an expert in all of this program.
Hmm.
I was like, holy shit.
Hmm.
This is a world leading company, right? Who has, top people on their staff. And this guy's saying, no one knows this whole thing. It's like, if they can't do it and there's nobody with a full-time salary who can figure out the whole thing, well, geez, I shouldn't
Yeah.
feel so bad about it.
Hmm. Such is life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a thing we all go through as kids and adolescents. I think it's a big reason for our rebellious phases is you start to realize that all these people that have been telling you what to do your whole life don't have their lives together perfectly and they don't know what they're doing. And it's like, hey,
Exactly.
you're winging it too? Like, all you guys are
Well,
winging it? What's going on here?
and that is when, as a teenager, I adopted the rather punk rock specific phrase, fuck authority,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Which
Totally.
eventually, as I matured, quote unquote, came to be question authority, which I think
Right.
is a lot healthier. Right?
Right.
But it's very true.
Hmm.
You look at the world and you're like, okay, it's just a bunch of humans doing the best they can.
Right. Yeah, but no reason to throw it all out, which is the rebellious teenager punk rock
Right.
approach.
Right.
That's pretty funny. So, where can we send people to get your book? Because I think it's a much needed kick in the ass. I would say,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take you through the stuff, nice plain language, and this is a silly thing, but I just like that you deliver it in kind of bite-sized pieces too. So
Yeah.
often when I'm reading a book, like I'm trying to decide if I'm going to read the next chapter, and if it's too long, I don't. But this is the type of
Exactly.
book where you're like, what the hell? I'll get this one, and it's only a few pages, but lots of nice stuff put bluntly often.
Mhm.
but very
I like to
clearly.
think of it as easy and fast to read with big, chewy ideas,
Mhm.
as well as cartoons.
Yeah.
So you can buy this thing anywhere on Amazon, or I mean, it's everywhere. You can just go find it. But really, if you guys are interested, I am more than happy to do complimentary Zoom sessions with anyone who would like to sign up. So you can just go to
Hmm.
my website, which is jeffleisowitz.com. That's JEFFLEIS like Sam, AWITZ.com. If you spell that anywhere near correctly, it should come up. And anyway, you can, just sign up for a time, and you can learn more about me and my coaching practice and stuff like that. And I love to work with creatives and musicians, especially, who are passionate and who are really ready to step it up.
Hmm. Nice. If you're done effing around, check out
Exactly.
Not Effing Around by Jeff Leisowitz and go to his website too of the same name. I'll have all these links in the show notes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time. Lots of great wisdom here. Stuff I know I'm learning quite a lot about and have to always remind myself about. It's a constant battle, but it's great to hear that you've got your own unique way of presenting it to the world.
That's the way we do it. Let's
Yeah.
rock on. That's what I
Rock
say.
on.
All right.
And everyone else, rock on as well. Have a great day. Hey, if you enjoyed the Music Production Podcast, please consider giving it a review on your favorite podcast provider and share it with a friend, somebody that you think might enjoy the show and get something out of it. That would mean a lot to me. And if you want to check out more of my work, including sound packs, tutorials, etc., head over to brianfunk.com. Thanks so much for listening and have a great day.